Next on NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
The rate of expansion of the ethanol industry is really the key factor that we're trying to get our hands around and understand.
Market Watch. It's becoming a big issue for ranchers and farmers across the country. Next, we'll take a look at how ethanol is produced and what it means for the markets. Plus, from the Cattle Learning Center, tips from the experts on how to protect the health of your herd.
And now, NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen with your host, Susie Ross.
Hello and welcome to NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. I'm Susie Ross. Ethanol is becoming a big issue in the cattle industry, and there are a lot of questions surrounding ethanol policy and just how far the federal government should go to promote renewable fuels.
Cattlemen's Capital Concerns, brought to you by Fort Dodge Animal Health, makers of Cydectin Poron and Triangle Vaccines.
It was one of the hot topics in Nashville. NCBA members talking at the Cattle Industry Annual Convention about what's next in the ethanol world.
It's completely different than anything we faced. It's a monster that's there that I don't think it's going to go away in 2 or 3 years like some of these other issues.
Now that ethanol production is booming, many cattlemen say it's time to rethink some of the current government subsidies.
A huge concern with the emphasis from the United States government on these, renewable fuels.
The fuel blending tax credit and the tariff on imported ethanol are set to expire near the end of the decade. NCBA policy opposes renewal of those incentives.
We need to understand the role that import tariff plays and what its role should be in the future as we grow this industry.
NCBA also wants greater emphasis on alternative fuels using products like grasses and wood chips.
We are not commercially viable in that today. I think we can be at some point, and when the president talks about spending money on that, that's what he's going after, is to push money on that to try to ramp that up and push it as fast as he can.
Cattlemen say they're in favor of alternative fuels, but not at the expense of animal agriculture. As the debate about ethanol continues, production of the product is booming. Large plants are being built in the Corn Belt, and many cattlemen are now feeding the ethanol byproduct to their animals. We headed to Illinois to see how ethanol production works. In the small town of Pekin, Illinois, ethanol is big business.
Quite a bit of corn going into ethanol. 3 plants within 10 miles of each other, I'd say.
Greg Calls works for ethanol producer Aventine. It's a company that is growing its operations. Aventine already operates 2 plants at the Pekin facility. One is a converted sugar mill built in the late 1800s. The other is a brand new plant that went online at the first of the year. Together, the 2 plants produce 158 million gallons of ethanol a year, and Aventine plans to have another plant online in early 2008.
Plants are getting more and more streamlined, more and more efficient. The ethanol industry as a whole is becoming much more efficient and streamlined.
The Aventine plants grind some 160,000 bushels of corn every day. The plants produce either a wet or dry ethanol byproduct that is sold around the world.
Depending on the product, on our dry gluten feed, for example, I bet about 80% goes on the river and goes to export. On the distillers right now, a lot of it is going barge down to the Gulf and going to probably Cuba, Mexico, some of the South American countries, so a lot of that is. On the wet product, 100% goes probably within 50 miles of the plant.
At Larson Farms, about an hour outside of Chicago, Mike Martz is using ethanol byproduct produced in the Midwest. Martz custom feeds most of the cattle on his operation and says the wet byproduct helps provide a nutritious diet for his animals.
The real advantage is 28% protein compared to 9% protein in corn, and then 8.5% on the distiller's grain for fat compared to about 3.5 for corn.
Martz says one of the challenges of feeding the wet byproduct is storing it, which can be especially difficult in the hot summer months. But Martz says the real challenge of feeding ethanol byproduct is the cost.
Can be an advantage or a disadvantage is price. I mean, we have a strong commitment that we have to buy this right. And some of these producers maybe are buying this stuff the same value of corn, and we feel that's too high. You've got to buy it right.
Market Watch, brought to you by Pfizer Animal Health.
In this week's Market Watch, Bill Holbrook of Pro Exporter Network provides his insights on ethanol's impact on the cattle industry. Pro Exporter provides research and analysis to all sectors of the grain industry.
Well, it's definitely raised the corn prices as we've seen already, and will continue to have an impact upon grain prices into the future. The rate of expansion of the ethanol industry is really the key factor that we're trying to get our hands around and understand.
But we've had high gas prices before and a desire for more energy independence. So why has ethanol taken off this time?
Technology has made a lot of progress in the last 20 years to where we make ethanol a lot cheaper from corn today. And it factors into an environment that is also very keyed in on energy independence, and the returns to some of these plants have been large enough to attract a lot of investment, a lot of research dollars, and a lot of companies into it that had never been there before.
Feeding ethanol byproduct can represent an opportunity, but Holbrook says cattlemen need the right approach.
It really relates back to understanding what you're getting and what the product profile is, and being able to match that into your rations the way you want to. Also feeding that information back through the system and back to the ethanol plants, and seeing if they will do something to adjust their product to compensate for those types of issues. But it's definitely something that has to be understood, because you can't degrade the quality of the end product.
Ahead on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, how ranchers like you are responding to the surge in ethanol prices. Also, reproductive diseases can greatly affect a cow-calf operation's bottom line. We'll show you how vaccination programs can protect your herd. But first, here's a look at this week's market summary provided by Cattle Facts.
In 1874, an innovation changed the beef industry forever. It was called barbed wire, and it brought an end to open range grazing and began a whole new era of cattle management. Today there's another breakthrough innovation changing the beef industry. It's called Draxxin, and it's one more way Pfizer Animal Health is working with veterinarians and cattlemen to open up a whole new era in animal health. To learn more about Draxxin, talk to your veterinarian.
Agriculture is a small portion of the population now, and if we're not working together, we're not going to get anywhere.
As our family, we cannot be in Washington, D.C. all the time, and I just couldn't live without NCBA representing.
They're looking out for our interests. They're there fighting for us every day.
If you got 1 cow or 2 cows or 100 cows, you need to be a member.
I'm a member of the NCBA because a long time ago, 35 years ago, I felt that I needed to know more of what my industry is doing. So I got started at the county level. If you're in the cattle industry, now's the time to join and let your voice be heard loud and clear.
You need NCBA working for you, and NCBA needs you. It's easy to join. Just call, get online, or talk with your state affiliate and sign up today.
You're watching NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Welcome back to Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Topping cattle industry news this week, Canada is now investigating its 9th case of BSE. The disease was found in a 6-year-old bull from Alberta. USDA is joining in the Canadian government's investigation. It's not known if this case will have any impact on USDA's proposed rule. It will allow expanded cattle and beef imports from Canada. Comments on that proposal are due March 12th. The stalemate with South Korea over U.S. beef exports continues to frustrate cattlemen as well as U.S. trade representatives. Several days of meetings in Korea brought little progress, and that doesn't bode well for a proposed free trade agreement between the two countries. NCBA will not support the agreement without a true opening of the Korean market to U.S. beef, and that's a feeling shared by many on Capitol Hill. A bipartisan group of U.S. senators agreed with that position in a letter to the Korean ambassador. And recovery efforts continue on the High Plains after this winter's severe blizzards. The Colorado Cattlemen's Association is asking for hay to help those impacted by the storms. Hay was already in tight supply due to drought, and the harsh winter has also reduced supplies. Head to our website at cattlementocattlemen.org to find out how you can help. Any farmer or rancher knows that there are serious diseases that can affect beef cattle reproduction. Cattlemen to Cattlemen's Todd McCartney recently had the chance to visit with a veterinarian from Fort Dodge Animal Health about what you can do to protect your herd.
Kenton, there are numerous reproductive diseases that literally rob producers of their profits. What are the primary reproductive diseases in cattle?
Well, there's a number of them, and some of the major ones are, of course, bovine viral diarrhea virus, bovine herpes virus, leptospirosis, Campylobacter fetus, and trichomoniasis.
Then let's start with BVD. We hear of it linked to abortion.
Yeah, and we will see abortion from BVD, but we can also see other problems, and a lot of that will depend on when, during gestation, that cow is exposed to the virus. So if it's, let's say, at breeding time, we may just see early embryonic death and decreased conception rates. Now, if exposure occurs later on during pregnancy, such as mid-gestation, we can see a lot of another set of problems, such as abortion, or we can see congenital abnormalities in the calf. Calves can be born with hydrocephalus, underdeveloped areas of the brain, abnormalities of the hair, the skin, and bone defects, as well as other problems.
Then the vaccination program, that's where we start, I'm sure.
Vaccination is where you want to start with respect to control and prevention of BVD, absolutely. And well, you need to have a good conversation with your veterinarian to decide, are we going to use modified live viral vaccines or are we going to use killed? Because certain modified live viral vaccines can be used in pregnant cows and some cannot. And those products that can be used in pregnant cows are only labeled for use in those cows if those same animals have been immunized about 30 days prior to breeding with the same product.
Then what is the discussion of PI relative to BVD?
That's a good question. PI stands for persistently infected, and it's rather a unique condition with regards to BVD virus, in that if that cow is exposed at a particular time during gestation, we can generate a calf that is persistently infected. Now, there's actually two ways to generate this calf. The first is, if we have a cow, a mama cow that is persistently infected, then every offspring she will ever have from then on will also be persistently infected. But that's rather an exception. The most common way we see these persistently infected calves is with a normal cow, but she is exposed to BVD virus during about the first 125 days of her pregnancy.
BVD is just one case that can affect the conception rate of your cow herd, but the good news is there are ways to protect your animals.
The producer first needs to develop a good relationship with his or her veterinarian to set up a good biosecurity and vaccination program.
Ahead on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, more tips from Fort Dodge on creating an effective vaccination program.
There ain't no bugs on me. There ain't no bugs on me. There may be bugs on some of you mugs, but there ain't no bugs on me.
Canine Advantix is the one that repels and kills disease-spreading fleas, ticks, and mosquitoes. Frontline Plus doesn't repel and isn't effective against mosquitoes. So ask your veterinarian for Canine Advantix, the one that repels and kills.
Yeah, there may be bugs on some of you mugs, but there ain't no bugs on me.
Purina's wind and rain minerals are research tested and field proven to provide balanced mineral nutrition essential for cattle health, growth, and reproduction. They're highly palatable so cattle consume what they need when they need it. And wind and rain mineral special formulation resists the elements so they won't blow out of the feeder and maintain their palatability even if they've been wet. Wind and rain cattle minerals from Purina Mills, building better cattle.
Welcome back. Let's head back out to Longview Animal Nutrition Center to learn about other diseases that can affect reproduction.
IBR exposure in a cow early on, you can just see some decreased conception rates and a transient return to service increase. However, exposure later on during pregnancy, we can certainly see abortions. Cattle that's never been exposed to herpes virus before, you can see abortion rates from 25 to 60%.
Kenton, how do veterinarians diagnose the reproductive form of IBR?
Well, typically what we want to do, we want to collect some good samples of the aborted fetus and placenta and make sure they get sent into the appropriate diagnostic lab. If we can, we like to send in everything. Just send in the whole aborted fetus and the placenta. If not, your veterinarian will know what samples need to be taken and where they need to be sent.
What about prevention and control?
Well, here again, the best place to start is with your replacement heifer pool. So sit down with your veterinarian, have him or her set up what kind of program we need to initiate. But with respect to our heifers, we want at least 2 doses, if not more, of modified live IBR viral vaccine in these heifers before they enter the breeding herd. Now, once they're in that breeding herd, then we can just booster them yearly with that same modified live. And the best time to booster cattle, irregardless of the reproductive disease we're talking about, is approximately 30 days prior to breeding.
Let's talk about lepto and its impact on our cow herd.
It's caused by a spirochete, which is a spiral-shaped bacteria, and it has its own motility, so this bacteria is able to move around on its own a little bit. It makes it rather unique. But leptospirosis is a bacterial disease in cattle and other mammals as well as man, so it's what we call a zoonotic disease. It can be spread from animals to man. In cattle, we can see a variety of problems, from abortion storms to sporadic abortions to just decreased fertility and increased services to conception, that type of thing. Prevention of leptospirosis, typically the hallmark of that is a good vaccination program. Most of the cattle vaccines that we have on the market today will have 5 different types of leptospirosis or leptospire bacteria in them. And they are typically combined with our viral products as well. So you can get one good solid vaccine that will contain the major viral components as well as the 5-way leptos that's important to provide protection to your cattle. Trick is the common name we give to a disease called trichomoniasis. Trichomoniasis is actually caused by a single-cell protozoan organism. Now, as with other venereal diseases, the bull actually just transmits it from cow to cow. He himself does not show any clinical signs. It's the cow that suffers the consequences from this infection. And those consequences can include decreased conception rates, long calving intervals, and frank abortions.
Kenton, here's a case where a good record-keeping program could really aid in early detection.
A good record program is vital because those folks that don't keep good records, that calving interval is going to increase and increase, and they're not going to pick it up very soon. So the first year, the producer may only have losses of maybe 10 to 20% as far as number of pregnant cows at preg check time. But the second year, as your number of cows, more and more of them become infected and your bulls are infected and spreading the disease from cow to cow, you can see decreased conception rates of up to 70% that second year.
Well, obviously we know the bull spreads the problem, but what are some things I can do on the ranch today to make a difference in prevention?
Well, you hit on a good point, Todd. We got to start with the bulls. And the best thing to do is to test those bulls and identify those that are trick positive and to cull them. And the best time to do this testing is 2 to 3 weeks after the start of the breeding season.
Well, the discussion of lepto takes you right to Vibrio because most cattlemen link those two together. Tell us about Vibrio as a reproductive disease.
Well, vibriosis, it's another bacterial disease and one that we call a venereal disease of cattle. It's caused by an organism that we refer to as Campylobacter fetus. The old term is vibriosis, but some veterinarians refer to it as Campylobacteriosis now. But either way, it's a venereal disease, and what happens, the bull, as with other venereal disease, he really shows no clinical signs, but spreads the disease from cow to cow. And in the cow, what we can see abortion and decreased conception rates.
Vaccination program.
There again, it's much like lepto, and many of our vaccines that contain lepto will also contain the Campylobacter antigen. So talk to your veterinarian, get a good product that has the antigens together that you need for your cattle, and then just vaccinate for Vibrio at the same time you vaccinate for lepto.
Well, then the take-home message here is reproductive performance. It is the cornerstone of a successful bottom line. And you've just identified 5 reproductive diseases that can be disastrous. What is the best way to safeguard this important asset?
Well, Todd, of course, I think the producer first needs to develop a good relationship with his or her veterinarian to set up a good biosecurity and vaccination program. Biosecurity involving identifying animals that are coming into your new herd. Are we going to test them? What are we going to monitor for? How are we going to identify these animals and be sure that they don't bring new diseases into our cattle? and then continually monitoring and surveilling those animals as you go down the road to make sure you don't get a big surprise at preg check time. The other component of that program, of course, is good vaccination. When to vaccinate, what to use, and how to do it the right way.
Record keeping, monitoring, vaccination, and a relationship with your practitioner.
You've got it.
It's important to talk with your vet about a vaccination program that best fits your herd. For more information on reproductive diseases, go to cattlementocattlemen.org. It's a hot topic in the cattle industry, ethanol. Ahead, we'll hear from cattlemen across the country on how they feel about the surge in ethanol production.
Calving season brings an air of excitement, but silent threats like trichomoniasis, vibrio, and lepto may rob you of your valuable calf crop. That's why there's TrickGuard and TrickGuard V5L from Fort Dodge Animal Health. Reproductive challenges met with the proven performance and convenience of TrickGuard vaccines. Fort Dodge focuses on ensuring the next generation of quality cattle, so you can focus on the next generation of cattle producers.
From fresh tomatoes to potatoes and chicken to beef, we're as picky about our quality ingredients as you are. Because that's what we're made of.
NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen, a television show by cattlemen for cattlemen.
At this year's Cattle Industry Annual Convention, there was a lot of talk about ethanol. Here's what some of the convention attendees had to say.
What's on my mind is how we deal with the change. The train is out of the yard. It's going down the track. We aren't going to stop this. And I think what I learned there is there's a number of industries, even beyond agriculture, that's going to be affected by ethanol.
Ethanol is going to be a real big issue. You know, it helps the farming segment. It doesn't particularly help the cattle segment because it increases the cost of feeding. But I think the cattlemen in general are supportive of ethanol. It's kind of, corn prices going up this year have hurt feeder cattle prices. So that's not a positive, but we think that anything good for agriculture as a whole, I think is, you know, long term, it's good for the cattle industry.
Ethanol is a key word. It depends on your perspective, of course. Cow-calf guys like us don't particularly like it. It's certainly going to have an impact on what our calves are worth. The farmers who produce a lot of corn, of course, it's a great boon for them. Not to take anything away from those people, but for those of us selling calves, it can really be an impact on what we're going to see next fall in our calf market.
It needs to be stressed more and more all the time is that we need more research dollars going into our side of the business. The ethanol industry is up and rolling, just as Kent said. We need research dollars to figure out how we're going to be able to utilize the co-products. And the co-products can be very, very beneficial to the cattle industry. We just need to figure out more and better ways to be able to utilize those co-products to feed cattle.
Give us your thoughts on the ethanol issue on our website at cattlementocattlemen.org. We are getting photos from around the country highlighting cattle operations. Let's take a look at this week's legacy photos. Send us pictures of your family and operation. Head to our website at cattlementocattlemen.org. Next week on NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen, an introduction to how the cattle industry works every day on Capitol Hill. Plus, we'll hear from Congressman Collin Peterson, new chairman of the House Agriculture Committee. And a day in the life of a promising young woman making her way in the cattle business. Thanks for joining us on NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Be sure to tune in next week. A new episode airs every Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on RFD TV.